Welcome back to Goldmine. So way back in the 1850s, the Shefflin family moved all the way from Pennsylvania to California to join the gold rush. They got there and quickly realized they were not striking it rich. And so they had 10 kids to take care of, and they gave up on finding gold. But one of their sons, Ed, would not give up. He was so fascinated. At 14 years old, he ran away from home to try to go find gold. And they brought him back. And again, at 17, he ran away to go strike it rich. So by the time he reached his 20s, he gets all the way out to all of these gold mines and never finds gold. And he has this rock bottom moment at 28 years old where he moves back in with his parents. He hasn't found any gold, but he decides, I'm not going to give up. And he goes looking again. And early in his 30s, he did not find gold, but he did find silver. One of the largest finds of silver. It made him famous, one of the most famous miners. He cashed out on this silver mine that he discovered and made over $600,000. He did it. That's millions of dollars in today's money. But he couldn't stop there. And he comes back home, he gets married, has a wife, but he can't stop chasing more wealth. And so he goes looking for more gold on the weekends, and he's leaving and finding more and more opportunities to try to find this gold. But he can't find it. And he's always searching and desperate for more until one day he's found hunched over a piece of gold ore dead at the age of 49. He died young. He missed so much of life because he couldn't be satisfied with what he has. What is it in us that makes us constantly want to chase more, to seek more? What is it that makes us want more and more wealth? I'm excited to look at that together. So open your Bibles to Proverbs chapter 23. Let's dive in. Proverbs chapter 23, starting in verse 4. Turn there with me right at the beginning tonight and follow along in Proverbs chapter 23. It says this: don't wear yourself out trying to get rich. Underline this. Be wise enough to know when to quit. Be wise enough to know when to quit. In the blink of an eye, wealth disappears, for it will sprout wings and fly away like an eagle. You heard that story of Ed Shefflin and the fact that he was always hustling and grinding, trying to find more and more gold way back in the days of the gold rush. And not much has changed since then, if you really think about the way we work today. I mean, today, when you look around, the world tells you that you got to hustle, you got to grind, you got to do whatever you can do to get more and more when you can. And what is it that causes us to chase? What is it that causes us to want more and more constantly, no matter how much we have? I remember when I was a little boy, I had this pocket baseball game that I loved. It was just this simple little game that you would hit the little button and then hit the ball, and I would play it in the car. I'd take it with me. It could like fit in my pocket. I'd run around with it. And I would just love this little game until I went to a friend's house and they had a Nintendo. And the Nintendo had not just Mario Brothers, but it had Zelda and Tetris and all these amazing games. And pretty soon I realized it's time for me to turn on the hustle. And so I went to my neighbor's garden, and they had a bunch of rocks that were really beautiful, and I decided I would go sell these crystals to the neighbors. And so as a young man, I started hustling at an early age, selling crystals to the neighbors. I made about $8 before my mom figured out that I was so upset that I didn't have a Nintendo. I was trying to buy one myself, and she shut the whole operation down. But it starts early for us, doesn't it? This desire to have more than what we already have. The Proverbs is going to give us so much wisdom on wealth. I mean, this guy named Howard Dayton studied through the whole Bible to see what it said about money, and he found over 2,350 verses in the Bible that deal with money. And Proverbs alone mentions money or the lack of it 74 times. So this is a big theme in the book of Proverbs that we're going to look at tonight. And to be clear, Proverbs is not a book of promises. So for anybody sitting here tonight ready for the get-rich-quick advice or money advice, this is not what Proverbs is about. Proverbs is going to give you wisdom for how to live in regards to wealth and money. And believe you me, if you have clean water, food, electricity, some form of transportation, even if it's public transportation, and decent enough medical care that you're still breathing, you are considered wealthy in the world today. You are in a top percentage of the wealthiest on this globe. So these words of wisdom are for every person sitting in this room tonight. And these aren't tips for how to be rich, but this will lead us closer to the heart of God as it comes to living with money. So if you want to take notes tonight, right out here in Proverbs chapter 23 in the margin, the first thing I want you to write is this: money has wings. That's right. Money has wings. It said, in the blink of an eye, wealth disappears, for it will sprout wings and fly away like an eagle. Here's what it means. Wealth is not security. There is no security in wealth. I want you to take just a second and think about how you would fill in this blank. I want to accomplish blank. You fill it in by the age 30. All of you students sitting here tonight, I want you to think just for a second, by the time you're 30, I want to accomplish what by 30? Share really quick with your neighbor, one of your friends right around you. What do you want to accomplish by the age 30? Go. Be honest. Don't say a churchy answer. Say what you really think. All right, wrap it up. All right, shh, come back to me here. Listen. So they've already studied your generation. Listen to me. They've already studied students your age to find out how most students your age would answer this question. 66%, 2/3, so like well over half of this room, statistically, said, I want to finish my education, start a career, and become financially independent by the age of 30. Listen to me. This is what you are being raised as a generation to point your life towards from an early age. A lot of you already know this is going to be very important for my life, for me to pursue this. But listen to this. Well down the list, the bottom three, here's a couple from the bottom three. Only 16% said by the age 30 they want to become more mature spiritually. Guys, only 9% of your generation said by the age of 30 that one of the things they wanted to accomplish was caring for the needy and the poor. The other statistic from the Barna research, this data that was really helpful and insightful to me, was that 43% of your generation, Gen Z, says that happiness is best defined as financial success. Almost half of your generation thinks that happiness is defined by financial success. So how important is it for us to listen to Proverbs tonight and what it wants to say to a generation sitting here tonight that has been told, and I don't blame you, you're living in a world that's telling you that this is so important for you to be pursuing this now, for you to be seeing the world around you through a lens that is actually going to disappoint so many of you, that is going to lead to so many things that are so unfulfilling if you buy into it. So, some of the things that are crippling this generation are a fear of failure, a fear of poverty or losing our comfort, and a false sense of security and status that money can bring. So here's another proverb that would hit home on this. Proverbs 18:11 says, the rich think of their wealth as a strong defense. They imagine it to be a high wall of safety. So the wisdom of Proverbs reminds us that money can't be counted on no matter how much of it we have. It has wings. The second thing you can write down next to Proverbs chapter 23 is this: ask for enough, not more. This is some of the wisdom of Proverbs for you tonight about money. Ask for enough, not more. It said it like this in the proverb we read at the beginning tonight. Be wise enough to know when to quit. There's a point where when you have enough, you don't need to be seeking more. Remember Ed Shefflin, that miner that we heard the story about in the video earlier? This is Ed right here. This is the man that for his whole life he continued to chase. And there's actually a city to this day named after the place where he struck it rich with silver. It's a little city called Tombstone, Arizona. It is named after him because they said, the only thing you'll find when you go out there is your tombstone. And he struck it rich, and he named the place Tombstone, Arizona. And not too long after that, the next place he struck it rich was his actual tombstone, where he died looking for more. He didn't know how to quit. Even though he'd found a wife and gotten married, he had built a mansion. He'd accumulated more than $1 million in wealth in that time, which was so much. He still couldn't quit. I love what a man named Agur contributed in one of the last chapters of Proverbs. So we talked about Solomon, the guy who wrote most of this, but the last two chapters are written by a couple of people that were not Solomon. And so one of them, his name was Agur. And in Proverbs chapter 30, you can turn to this one with me if you want really quick. Keep your hand there in chapter 23, because we'll come back and take another note in a second. But listen to what he said. The best wisdom, he says in verse 15 of the leech always wants more, right? But the best part is here in verse 7 of Proverbs 30. He says, "Oh God, I beg two favors from you. Let me have them before I die. First, help me to never tell a lie. Second," underline this. This is one of my favorite words in all of Scripture on contentment and wealth. "Give me neither poverty nor riches." Underline this. Give me just enough to satisfy my needs. For if I grow rich, I may deny you and say, who's the Lord? And if I'm too poor, I may steal and thus insult God's holy name. So I want you students from an early age to be asking God for enough, not more, because that's all you need is enough. You don't need more. So the next thing I want you to write in Proverbs 23, you can turn back to Proverbs 23 where you're taking notes, and you can write this down. This is such an important truth for you to grasp right now. Your worth has nothing to do with money. The rest of your lives, you will be told that you are worth only the amount that you have in a bank account. You are worth only the status that you have achieved because of the wealth you can accumulate in this life. You will hear time and time again that you are defined by what you're worth financially. But money does not determine worth or value in God's eyes. Proverbs 22 verse 2 says, "The rich and the poor have this in common. The Lord made them both." Rich and poor, the Lord made them both. There's a man named Austin Russell. Here's a picture of him. He is the world's youngest self-made billionaire right now. He is 26 years old, and he is one of the guys that has created the technology that self-driving cars can use to navigate the roads and not crash into things. So he started at a very early age developing this technology, and then his company went public, and reports say he is worth $2.4 billion. But what does God say he's worth? You know, God says he's worth the exact same as the poorest of the poor on any place on the face of this earth. Because the truest thing about your identity is not your material wealth. It's the fact that you have equal value, the same as every other human being, because you were made in the image of God, and that is what gives you worth, not the money you make. You know what the material worth of Jesus was? Probably not much. As far as we know, Jesus was not a wealthy Jewish man. His earthly father, Joseph, was a carpenter. But his heavenly Father controls all wealth and still didn't give his own son great wealth here on earth. Think about how much God could have given his son Jesus when he came to earth just to make sure he had the most of everything, to spoil his son lavishly while he lived here on this earth. I mean, surely he left the comfort of heaven, so we need to make it nice and comfortable for him on earth. And yet God allowed his son Jesus to come and walk the face of this earth as just a poor Jewish man. And Jesus himself had a lot to say about money and rich people. And before you think rich people is everybody but you, let me remind you again that today, in the world we live in, every person sitting in this room would be considered rich. So don't put yourself out of what Jesus wants to say in Luke chapter 12. He said this to a group of people listening, and he told them the story about a rich man. He said, "Beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own." This is Jesus. Life is not measured by how much you own. Verse 21, he says, "Yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God." Jesus had a lot more to say, but that's pretty strong. So never forget the thing that makes you the most valuable in this life is the Creator who gave you equal value when he made you in his own image. That's what gives you worth. And he's the God who desires a relationship with you. He wants to give you more than material wealth because he wants you to find satisfaction in him. And he wants you to find salvation in his son, Jesus. And the best news is that you actually are worth his son, Jesus, dying for. That's why he sent his son, Jesus, to die on a cross for each and every one of us, because you are worth it. That's the gospel. So your worth has nothing to do with money. So let me close by just showing you a couple things in Proverbs. It says 70-something things about money and wealth. So it's kind of hard to pick a few, but I want to close by just sharing a couple of thoughts about what wise people would do with the wealth that God gives them. So for a lot of us in this room, I think we need to listen closely to what God expects of us because he has given us so much. Proverbs 21:20 says that a fool spends whatever they get. Now, let me tell you, this one would hit me pretty hard most of my life. Up until I was probably 23 or 24, I will admit to you, my savings account was little to nothing not because I didn't make money, because I spent every dime of it. I mean, I was the guy that every paycheck, and I worked hard. I was like a hard worker, had a good paying job. I just had a lot of things I was interested in, a lot of things I wanted to do, a lot of stuff I thought I should probably go buy. So every payday, it was like, let's get it. How many of you, tell the truth, are a spender like me? How many of you, like, when you get money, you're kind of like, okay, what can I get here? Okay, let me see here. Okay, thank you for being honest and making me feel better. Now, how many of you are like my older sister and you are a saver? You will save that money. You're kind of scared. You're like, we better hang on just in case. Okay, shh, listen to me. Regardless of where you are on that spectrum, listen to me. Shh, listen, hey, real quick. Hey, regardless of whether you feel like you might be a saver or a spender, every one of you sitting in this room is called by God to be a giver. Me, you, every person, every person that has been blessed, even without money, but with time, with skills, with abilities, we are all called to be givers of whatever it is that God has given us. Proverbs 21:26 says, some people are always greedy for more, but the godly love to give. The godly love to give. So instead of living into a culture that tells you that you need more, what if you started asking God to speak or reveal to you what you needed to give or what you needed to give more of? Maybe it is your money. Maybe it is your time. Maybe it is something God's gifted you to do that you need to start giving more of to serve him, to love others. 8 out of 10 students in a survey recently said that they believe they are financially responsible. Regardless, my question is, how many of you are generous? That says whether you're really trustworthy with what God is giving you. Am I generous? Will I give? We have Harvest Weekend coming up in 2 weeks, which is going to be so cool. Yes. But here's the thing. It's really easy for Harvest Weekend to be something that is for your parents or for the grown-ups in the church to give because they've all got these high-paying jobs. They can give all their money to support all the missionaries and the church plants. And maybe you've heard this if you've been here for a few years about Harvest Sunday. Everybody stop and listen to me right now. We want to do something the next 2 weeks we have not done in student ministry since I've been here. We're going to have 2 weeks of giving from students in this ministry. On every campus, the next 2 weeks, we are asking you to bring your money. I'm not asking you to bring your mom and dad's money. I'm not asking you to bring a check from grandma. I'm asking you to bring some of your money. And some of you are like, yo, I'm broke. Okay, let's talk about that. First of all, God says that some of the people that brought the least were some of the people that were really bringing the most. And so some of you, maybe all you have is 50 cents, but that's all you've got. And you're ready to bring that next week and give it to God. Maybe some of you, you don't find the 50 cents in the drawer and you have no money, but you do have some time. And you have some moments around Thanksgiving when you're bored and you sit around and you play video games. You say, God, I want to use that time to feed hungry people. God, I want right now to start asking you to give me what it is that I need to do to give more. And you're going to listen. If you like reminders, you could write it down on a piece of paper to remind you, put it in your pocket so you'll see it later. If you use a phone to remind yourself, make a reminder for the next several days to sit and listen to God and ask him, God, what do you want me to give? And the next 2 weeks, we made it 2 weeks because we know some of you, next week, you probably are like, oh no, I've got this. Well, you can do it the next week. So you've got 2 chances the next 2 weeks. And when we worship, we are going to have a moment the next 2 weeks for you to give to Harvest Weekend. We're going to share more about Harvest Weekend and what God's calling our church to. Chris Shelby, one of our pastors, is going to come and spend time in a couple of weeks making sure you students understand exactly what those dollars are going to and those cents are going to. But we want you to go ahead of this and start asking God right now for what he wants to do through you to give. So as we have those collections, I want to close by just motivating you with one more verse. You can stand and listen to this verse as we get ready to worship again. Y'all go ahead and stand up and listen to this. Luke chapter 12. This is Jesus. After he tells this story about money, listen to what Jesus says. He says, sell your possessions and give to those in need. This will store up treasure for you in heaven. Hey, listen to this. And the purses of heaven never get old or develop holes. Your treasure will be safe. No thief can steal it, and no moth can destroy it. For wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be.